Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're going to be looking at the Patriot Ordnance Factory model P-415. We're sort of going to start this a little bit differently because the owner, Frank DeSomma, was killed this past year in June 18th of 2020 in a motor vehicle accident. Frank was only 57 years old. Frank DeSomma was a friend of mine. I've known Frank for many, many years. Frank was a very interesting guy. There's no question he was a patriot. He believed in this country. He believed in the Second Amendment. Those of us who knew Frank could be a little bit on the abrasive side. He was very opinionated. But Frank was a good man. He was a brilliant man. He came up with a lot of really original ideas. He contributed a lot to the industry and even to our country. He had even talked about donating weapons to Mr. Donald Trump's walls to his guards for free. He was very involved with two-way and our government. So I just wanted to do a call out because, again, Frank was a very good man. The industry lost a very important person in the industry. They lost a lot of talent. I don't know where POF's going to be going from here. I don't know who's taking it over or whatnot, but the industry lost a lot the day that Frank was killed. So talk a little bit more about Frank and the history of POF. Frank was actually born in Brooklyn, New York. So obviously there's not too many good gun companies that come up in a state like New York. So he grew up really in Arizona. He spent 28 years in the aerospace industry. This was not his first career. Basically in his second career, he decided he wanted to get into the AR business. He started shooting. He liked the rifles. When Frank first started out, he needed to find a niche. He knew he couldn't compete with Bushmaster, Colt, any of the big companies, so he had to find something that was different. And what he thought was the external piston was relatively unheard of at that time. We're going back to the 2002 time period, which is when POF was incorporated. And he decided what he wanted to do was he wanted to make the industry's first external piston version of the AR-15. And when you look at the dates, he very well may have, because if you look at the 2003 SHOT Show is when Frank showed his P-415. At the SHOT Show of 2004, also the HKM-4 was introduced, and then of course 2006 was the LWRC. So you look at those time periods. The HK-416 and the POF came out at roughly the same time, but the POF actually went into production. It was shipped and it was sold. Frank was not a fan of the internal piston system. He felt that it caused the gun to get dirty. It was difficult to suppress, and it basically put a lot of dirt back into the system. Although it worked, again, he had to find his own niches, which is exactly what he did with his external piston system. So the rifle that we're looking at here is a P-415. This was his flagship gun that he had. It was his first gun that he really introduced. This is a more modernized version. In fact, this is what's referred to as the Gen 3. So we're going to go over some of the stats on this. We're looking at 5.56 millimeter. Now, he has a three-piece gas system in here, which is an external piston. As we can see right through the handguards, we can see the operating rod in there. It's not a closed system, but we do have quite a long piston mechanism, which we're going to see in a little bit when we take some things apart here. And if you look at the upper receiver, this is very typical of an M4. You have forward assist, you have a fire cartridge case deflector, ejection port, dust cover. And you're looking at a 7075 T6 forging on both the upper and lower receiver. So it's made of the typical material you see out of any AR-15 M16 type rifle. Now the handguard we have on here, this is the latest. This is, I believe, it's the 11.5 inch. This is the M-Lock. Now, of course, over the years, we had Mill Standard 1913 he had on there. He would have M-Lock, you'd have Keybond. But of course, this is the direction the industry is going is with the M-Lock. But we do have a continuous 1913 rail from front to rear, which is very important for maintaining zero. When you remove optics, you remove any type of optic, laser, or whatnot. You get your immediate return to zero by having that. You'll also see we do have QD slots on the front, in front of both the left and the right hand side. You have a 1913 rail on the bottom here, so you can have a bipod. So you do have a stable 1913 rail on the front where you don't have to use any kind of an insert, which is good because the M-Lock, as much as they are tight, they can move. But when you have this as part of the handguard, it's much more sturdy, which is why it's good for the optics and good for the bipod. Now the barrel we have on here is quite a special barrel. We're looking at a 4150 chrome moly vanadium barrel. That's very interesting because he does not go with a standard 1-in-7. He goes with a 1-in-8 inch twist. This is a relatively heavy barrel. I wouldn't say heavy. It's a thicker profile. It does have fluting on it. Now, he had chose to go with the 5R rifling, which is more of the match rifling. If you look at the actual shape of the lands and grooves, you will see these come to more of a angle than they are sharp, which tends to give you better accuracy. He's gone with that. It's also a cold hammer forged barrel. And he also uses a polygon type rifling, similar to that what H&K uses. You have a relatively very expensive barrel here with all that he's been done to it. It is nitride coated. And the flash suppressor that you see on here, you'll see it's got three, it's a muzzle brake basically. It has three slots on here. And again, this does not help you with sound at all, but it does a wonderful job for as far as accuracy is concerned. And there's something else I want to talk about with this barrel, which is very unique. This is something that was developed by Frank DeSomma. This barrel has what's called the E-squared system on here. E-squared is enhanced extraction. Basically what he's done is he's taken the chamber and right where the neck of the cartridge case is, it cut 4 radials. And what those radials do is when the bullets being forced out the barrel, the gas pressure goes back and it goes through those channels and it imparts pressure right on the shoulder of the cartridge case. What that does is it more quickly breaks the cartridge case free of the walls of the chamber. So when you're extracting, your extractor is doing relatively little work. Most of the work is done by the E-squared system. So what this does is it increases reliability. This is not like the fluting like you see on an H&K. It's very different. This is a fluting that's designed specifically to take gas, to use it to push the pressure onto the shoulder of the cartridge case to break it free of the chamber. So the extractor is doing very, very little work. That was something that Frank had done on all of his guns. Some people have said that it affects accuracy. Now, everything I've done with these guns, I don't see any difference. Then again, I put this thing into a vise taking away all human factors and shot it to see if there's anything, but on a user level, I don't see it making any difference in accuracy, but you definitely see that it's a very big reliability enhancement. Now, Frank had tried, he told me in the past he wanted to license this to people, but unfortunately nobody ever picked it up. But the E-squared is a very unique. It does an excellent job of what it's intended. And I think it certainly has merit to be put on any combat type rifle because it certainly helps with extraction, especially with shorter barrels, where the help you can get because of the higher residual pressures. Now, taking a look at the lower receiver on here, this is what's referred to as the Gen 3. Now, of course, with the generations are different ones. You have the standard mil-spec type generation, and you would have some issues with ambidextrous, and basically when you get really down to the nitty gritty with the Gen 3, it all comes down to ambidextrous features. So we're going to take a look at some of those features right now. So as you see, we have an ambidextrous safety left and right hand side. We'll take a look at the left hand side in a minute. And you'll see that we have a bolt release. Now this is not a bolt catch on the right hand side. This is specifically a bolt release. If you want to lock it to the rear, you have 2 different ways you can do it. You have the standard paddle on the left hand side, but you also have an F and FL type style where you can push upward, and as you pull the bolt back, you can lock it from the bottom. So your bolt lock, you have a bolt lock in the trigger guard, and you have a bolt lock on the left side of the receiver. So then we flip the receiver over. You see we have an ambidextrous magazine release and your bolt catch. So again, bolt catch here and over here, ambi safety. You also see we have a nice finger groove here, so you can place your finger on here to keep, obviously, for trigger discipline. And this is on both sides. So that's excellent. You also have a beveled magazine well. This makes it much easier to insert a magazine in low-level light. And you can see we have an oversized trigger guard for definitely use with gloved hands, also for use with the bolt catch as well. Looking at the rear of the stock assembly, this is a Voltor stock. Now we have one of our viewers sent this gun. We're very grateful to him. He had made some modifications to this, so this is not the normal stock that would come with it. But we want to take a look at something here in the lower receiver. We're going to disassemble this and we're going to take a close look. When you look at the POF rifles, you will see a lot of Frank DeSomma's design. Everything he has made modifications to, he has made even better. Due to the fact that he knew he was making an external piston rifle, he knew he was going to have an issue with carrier tilt. And he had figured out a way to deal with carrier tilt so it would not damage the receiver or the rifle. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pop out this buffer. We want to take a look at this receiver extension. As you see here, we do have a standard castle nut. Look at the bottom. We also have a QD point, and we also have a 6th position receiver extension. We also have additional holes in here to reduce weight as well. But what makes this thing very special is, as you can see from the way the buffer tube or the receiver extension is made, it comes out forward and it comes around where the buffer retainer pin is. What that means is when you close the upper receiver, the tail of your bolt is already sitting in the receiver extension. There's no jump from the upper receiver into the receiver extension, because what's basically going to happen, you're going to have a fulcrum where you're going to have the bolt's going to be struck in the top, and its ass end's going to want to go down this way. Well, instead of that ass end digging into the receiver extension, it goes straight back because you have these already inserted into the receiver extension on the bottom. So This is something he had offered separate. So any of you guys who wanted to put this on your external piston guns to increase your reliability and also to decrease your issue with having wear on your receiver extension, this is something that you can buy. But this is an incredible device for dealing with the issues of bolt carrier tilt. The trigger that we see in here is a Geisley trigger. This is not the original trigger that came with this rifle. The owner of this rifle had changed it out to a Geisley. I want to talk a little bit about what the actual trigger is that comes with it. The trigger that comes with this is basically a trigger pack that was designed by a POF that drops into place. It's a single stage 4.5 pound trigger. It's held by K&S hammer and trigger pins on the side. It's an excellent trigger. This particular customer felt that the 2-stage was much better. That's what their choice was. But the actual POF will come with a drop-in trigger mechanism, which is available also if you upgraded your rifle. Now the buffer in here also, this has also been changed. This is a H2 type buffer made by Spikes Tactical. As Frank DeSomma designed his rifle, he designed it around a standard carbine buffer, which is the 3 steel weights. It didn't necessitate the use of a heavy buffer. This customer, or this owner of this rifle, decided he wanted to put an H2 in there for whatever reason. But the way this rifle comes from the factory is with a standard carbine type buffer. Also, you want to notice on the receiver is we have 2 locations here for inserts to tighten the receiver. That happens on both the front and the rear. This enables this rifle to have an extremely tight fit. Now we're going to take a look at the upper receiver. First, I want to talk about the bolt carrier group. The charging handle that comes on here is what's referred to as a tomahawk. It's a relatively large charging handle. This owner decided he'd like to go with the Raptor, but that's what they normally come with. I'm going to talk about the bolt carrier group because there's also some Frank DeSomma in this as well. Now, looking at the bolt carrier, this is a one-piece bolt carrier, and this started out this way. DeSomma, he realized early on that it would not work to have a 2-piece with a separate part here that it would break. So he machined it in and has a patent with the 1-part tombstone. You can see we have a relatively lightweight carrier. It's got a nickel boron type coating to it. Now, what we want to talk about is the cam pin. Now, what this is referred to is the roller cam that Frank DeSomma had designed personally. Now, this does have some, and we and Frank, we had discussions about this. The first time I had ever seen a round cam pin was on one of the really early Armalite AR-10s in Reed Knight's museum from the original Armalite company back in Hollywood. It was slightly different in the way that it was made, but it was still a roller cam. So the design certainly came from Armalite in those days, but he had certainly changed it. By having this on here, you don't get those the cuts basically that you have in the upper receiver behind the cam track path. You don't have those cuts in here, and this is much easier on friction. I have to say, all of my external piston guns, I drop these in. Now, if you want to put these in your internal piston guns, due to the fact that it's round in the size, you have to buy a special carrier key and drop on there, so you can remove it in and out, which is he sells as a kit, so you can do that. But for any of the 308s and many 308s, I put this in as well. This is certainly a design enhancement that can go on any rifle. If it fits, it goes on, especially in external pistons. I put this in my LMTs, everything that I have that's external piston. I think this is an excellent enhancement. The bolt we see here, nothing special about that. It's a standard Carpenter 158 bolt. It does have the same kind of a nickel plating to it. But as we see here, nickel plating, a lightweight bolt. Unlike most external piston guns, he doesn't require the additional weight that most of them have. Now, looking at the upper receiver, as we see, this is a standard upper receiver with a handguard that goes on top, and you have the external sleeve. Now, one of the complaints that people have had about the P-415 when it first came out was how high up your optics do sit. Because if you look, this is a standard M4 upper receiver. You have a sleeve that goes over the receiver, comes back to the rear, so you're raising your optics quite high compared to most. Now, certainly it's something that you can get used to without too much of a problem. The optic I chose for this for testing was by Mayapta. Mayapta is out of the Czech Republic. They do a lot of optics for the Czech Army. And I had seen them overseas, but I never got to see them up close or be able to use them. One of the reps that I worked with for another company just became the rep for Mayapta, and she had sent me one of these for T&E. I threw some armed store lever mounts on it, and we took this one to the range, and we tested it with it. And I have to say I was quite impressed with the optic. It was very, very clear. The reticle didn't seem as dark as I would like. That's probably the only thing I didn't care for was it seemed like it was very light, very much like the Elcans. It's not as dark as most. But you do have excellent adjustment. This is a lot of lighting because of the large aperture on the end, but it's a very impressive scope. We're probably going to be doing another video on the optic by itself. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this to the range and we're going to see how it shoots. Now, the rifle shot exceptionally well. This is not the first POF I've had. Over the years, when they first came out, I had the POF Puritan. I've had the Renegade Plus. I've had a couple of the 308s, the new Revolutions. Accuracy has always been pretty precise with all of these. In fact, most of them have always been sub-MOA, which this was no exception. We had sub-MOA groups with the ammunition that we shot. We had used Black Hill 77 grain OTM. We used some SIG 77 grain OTM, as well as a Black Hills 55 grain full metal jacket. Reliability has always been stellar. The gas system that you have on here is very reliable. You do have adjustments in the front. You have 3 adjustments. This gun is designed to be suppressed. We do have 3 positions. We have off, we have suppressed, and we have normal. So we do have 3 different settings. Adjustments are done quite easily. Push inward, and you can rotate. So we're showing you some photographs of the disassembled gas system. It does come out the front easily for maintenance. You do have a relatively thin operating rod on here compared to most rifles that I've seen, but it's never been a problem. Reliability has always been good no matter what ammunition that we've tried. The rifle is very, very well built. You have so much in here that is very, very different. You know, another really interesting thing that Frank DeSomma did was the barrel sink on here too. You have a heat sink on the barrel for the barrel nut, and basically this heat sink goes all the way across the entire length of the chamber. And you're looking at 17 times, like 17% of the heat is drawn out by this, so it stays that much cooler for suppressed automatic fire. There's been some tests with the various 415 rifles for automatic where they're very well. Now, POF has never really gotten into the international market until recently. More recently, they've actually gone in and tried for some military contracts overseas. There was one that I'm aware of that they did quite well in. Unfortunately, they couldn't meet the logistics end of it for as far as the production numbers that were necessary. So you get a lot of that where you have very good guns, but you have companies who are relatively small, and with the requirements to make military contract guns is pretty massive, what you have to do. And it takes a while to get into that. Lewis Machine Tool is a good example of that. A company who starts off small, and then what they had to do to get to where they are for as far as military sales, the expansion was dramatic to be able to meet those numbers. But overall, you're looking at some of the highest quality weapons in the industry. You're looking at probably the first commercially available external piston version of the AR. Very well thought out. A lot of proprietary components, and a lot of the components on here you can buy to upgrade to your rifle. Especially the trigger mechanisms and some of the stuff in the roller cam pen and so forth. So again, Frank leaves a very good legacy, and we certainly hope the company still performs well and has the same amount of innovations coming up in the future. But Frank was the designer there. He was the one that came up with these ideas. He was the one that sat down at the CAD machine and did it. So it's going to be very curious to see what happens with POF in the future. But I do hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you.